It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. You can see on the Sharp Interactive board, I have Ricoh underneath. I'm asking a question. Is Ricoh struggling under bad decisions? Is Ricoh struggling under bad decisions? Folks, it was about a year ago. Bloomberg put an article out there, and the Document Imaging channel went crazy. I've talked about this a couple of different times, but I wanted to go back in time. I wanted to talk about this article again, and then I want to share a response to that article from our friends over at the Canada Report. Because when I read this for the third time, because the first two times when I read it, I'm like, I just can't believe our industry thinks this way. I wanted to read it again, and it really outlines to me the root problem with the Document Imaging channel and their transition aspirations. And it's in the words in the article in the Canada Report. And Frank's not the only one that talked about this. I talked about it as well. I did a video on it. Actually, I was really excited about it. But I was the only one excited about it. Other than the shareholders of Ricoh who thought, hey, this is fantastic. Ricoh's actually going where the customers are going. Maybe we should invest in the company. Had their highest spike in 30 years. Of course, now it's right back where it was and less. Because Ricoh backtracked the conversation. And I think it's important for us to think about this as we move forward. Because I think it's a lack of boldness in the leadership, and not only Ricoh, but all the OEMs for the most part. It's the boldness in the leaders that are afraid to talk about print in a way that gets people upset, even though the way they're talking about print is based on the realities of the customers they service and support. So we don't want to talk about realities, we want to talk about fantasies. Let me just say this, leaders who pacify those with unrealistic print-based business objectives won't move the company forward. That's at Ricoh, that's at dealerships, that's everywhere. If the goal is to just pacify leaders around the importance of print, the importance of their complacency, the importance of their stubbornness, it's never going to happen. You're never going to move anything. You're never going to change the game. And I've talked about that so many times. But let's think about Ricoh. You know, they made some huge investments. They bought Lanier. They bought Icon. They basically bought the largest direct business in the world, okay? They had this huge direct business. And what did they do in 2017? They realized that was a bad decision. They spun it all back off to the dealers for the most part. And they said when they did that, they did it because it was too expensive to deliver printed supplies and its services in this 1990s business model or this 1980s business model. It was too expensive to do it. They were so spot on. So spot on. And then they went and they decided to talk to the world about a new strategy, a strategy that would be, well, it would keep them relevant without print monies, without print operating profit. Because they knew that print money and print operating profit was going to go away. Or it was going to reduce to such a small amount that it wouldn't be relevant to their continuous relevance. Remember? Just common sense. So let's just go ahead and talk about this article real quick. So Bloomberg puts out this article, and the title of it was Out of Print, Investors Cheer, Ricoh's Pandemic Inspired Move Away from Paper. Office equipment maker unveils plan to shift to digital, shares surge most in nearly 30 years on business. But folks, look at the shares, okay? Over here, look where it's at right now. It's about right where it was, a little lower, when they made this announcement. So the marketplace realized, well, I guess Ricoh was just talking, they were just dreaming. They weren't really going to do it. We really thought Ricoh was going to go where the customers were going. It looks like they're going to double down on print. Looks like they're doubling down on print because they went out and bought a scanning company. What's that all about? Ladies and gentlemen, I want to read something. But by the way, I did a video when that article came out, and I was kind of cheering them on. I was asking them some questions based on what they were talking about in their financials, that kind of warning them, well, you better start talking more about this and what's the details around this and how are you really going to get there. But I was excited that they were actually talking about getting there, getting to a place where the majority of their revenue, the majority of their operating profit was going to come from services outside of print. What a fantastic thing to be able to share with your investors. What a fantastic thing to be able to share with the world. Ricoh, we're on a path to continuous relevance. We're going to do all these things, and when print falls off the cliff, we're going to be ready. But no, that's not what happened. That was for 5 seconds of their life. And then a couple dealers, I guess, called them up and said, oh, what are you doing? You're getting out of print. The Canada Report. Let me just read this article from the Canada Report. It's not very long, but it's very, very important because I believe this sums up the mindset of our industry. And this mindset has to change, and it has to change now. I mean, otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in a really, really bad position. Frankly speaking, no, Ricoh has not given up on print. On March 4th, 2021, in Bloomberg piece by Gerald Reedy, with a headline that read, "Out of print, investors cheer. Ricoh's pandemic-inspired move away from print." Now, if you read that first sentence, you're kind of excited about this. Investors cheered? Well, aren't we in business to get our investors to cheer? That's a good thing, right? I don't think that's a bad thing, right? I mean, hey, look at Ricoh. They're doing this. This is fantastic. Stock goes up. Everybody's excited. Let me read the very next sentence. If that headline was not bad enough, I'm thinking to myself, what the hell's bad about that headline? I mean, if that headline if it would have said this, Ricoh stock craters. Ricoh stock craters because Ricoh made an XYZ bad decision. I could get it if that wasn't bad enough. But this is a good thing. Investors were happy. Highest jump in 30 years. If that headline was not bad enough, he followed with, print is dead. Japan's Ricoh company, best known as a maker of copiers, printers, faxes, and other office mainstays, has joined those saying no. Ladies and gentlemen, this is almost disturbing. I wrote above this article, I said how it shouldn't work over how it couldn't work. And I want everybody to think about this as we go through today's episode. Why is our industry trying to figure out how it shouldn't work? Think about what I just said. How it shouldn't work. It shouldn't work because Ricoh, they're one of the largest print manufacturers. It shouldn't work because Ricoh has all these dealers selling all their printers and copiers. They're making livelihoods from selling printers and copiers and fax machines. This shouldn't work. But what if they actually looked at how it couldn't work? Talked about that. You know why they don't? Because it doesn't make any sense, because it will work. The bottom line is Ricoh was spot on. Where Ricoh dropped the ball is their leadership was weak. That's a fact. They should have went out there and doubled down. They should have called Frank up and said, hey, we appreciate you writing that article, but you're wrong. Not the other way around. They should have called Frank up and said, all the analysts that wrote about this, and called him up and said, hey, you guys, the reality of it is the end users are who we service and support. Okay? The end users are the ones that consume our products. And we need to go as a company where those end users are going. And it's not going to be tomorrow or the next day, but our plan as Ricoh Corporation is to make sure we maintain a continuous relevance, and we're going to do whatever we have to do that. And I suggest that you as dealers, you as analysts, do the same thing. Folks, the whole time this was going on, Jim over there at Ricoh showed up on the Guy with the Hat show talking about they're kicking off A3 and this is so important to us, print's so important. It was so unbelievable. It could have been a comedy skit. The whole argument back and forth. Because those investors, the real world out there, they're thinking to themselves, boy, what the hell are these people doing? Just because the situation that everybody's in is going to get massively affected as the industry changes, we're going to try to keep it where it is. This shouldn't happen because of this, because of that, because of this. This shouldn't happen because we're all stubborn. This shouldn't happen because there's no way in the world we are positioned to transition. This shouldn't happen because, man, we're going to have to hire different people to do all these different things. This shouldn't happen because we're going to have to make investments so we stay relevant. What if for 1 minute all those analysts talked about how it couldn't work? Because if they would have took the thought process to figure out how this couldn't work, they would have realized real quick, well, it could work. Not only could it work, it's probable that it will work. That's the difference, folks. That's why I do what I do every day. Because our industry is stuck in this why things shouldn't work. And it's just apparent everywhere you look. And this hasn't changed over the last year. And folks, you know, when Ricoh said this, there was a reason they said it. Because they were struggling. They were struggling to make consistent operating profits, like a yo-yo over there. Their last fiscal year, they did $11.7 billion top line revenue. They had a $276 million operating profit. That's nothing to write home about. Okay? 1.5%, 2% operating profit's not going to get you where you need to go. They say here, and I did a video on this, 10 years of growth. They had 1, 2, 3, 4 years of growth and 6 years of flat or falling. And those 6 years of flat or falling were the last 6 years. The only time they had any growth was from 2020 to 2021, and it wasn't that much, but come on, folks, we were shut down completely in 2020, right? So we had a little bit of growth. Ricoh was spot on. Where they failed was their leadership. And I'm going to say it just like that. They should have doubled down, and they should have been able to articulate the path that they were chosen. And they should have got the dealers to understand that path. Instead, they doubled down on yesterday to appease an audience that wasn't quite ready to accept a reality in the market. And it's really sad that this happened. Because Ricoh was first, they came out bold, their investors loved it, and they backtracked the whole conversation. But I want to talk about some things that I see the industry doing, Ricoh, and for the most part, a lot of the players in the space. You know, the copier has nothing to do with where you are going. But yet, I believe everybody's buying up assets to sell more print, even though the customers want less print. We're buying up things because we think the remote worker's going to put printers in their house, so now we want to get this other stuff for their house so we can get the printer in their house. I mean, folks, we're too obsessed with this printer machine, right? We got it in the middle. I want to ask everybody a question. Are we bringing in technologies to create an equipment need on a product that people need less and less every day? And our answer to that is let's make them need it. Let's bring in technologies that make the end users need our product. It's like, what? It's ludicrous. They need your product less and less every day, and there's technologies out there, relevant technologies, that allow them to accomplish that. Not using your product and using it less and less every day. But I think about some of the products that Ricoh bought that I believe were just bought so they could sell more print. DocuWare. DocuWare is not innovative. DocuWare was innovative 15 years ago. DocuWare I believe, is almost irrelevant. And the reason I say that is that most software applications out there, most business processes out there have adapted so drastically over where processes were when DocuWare was invented, if you will. And these types of softwares are going to be less and less relevant. As we see people like Salesforce, as we see what Microsoft's aspirations are and Google's aspirations are and AT&T's aspirations are, and all these tools that are made available in the cloud to help people navigate information behind glass more and more. And then what does Ricoh do? They go out and they buy Fujitsu Scanning Company. For what? So they could get more out of DocuWare because you got to have a scanner to go into the DocuWare. Folks, this is just me, okay? I truly believe there's going to be another impairment charge related to DocuWare and related to the scanning. I don't know what they were thinking when they bought that scanning. I did an episode separately on that. Panasonic was in the scanning business. What did they do? They just gave it away. They didn't even give it away. They just shut it down. They didn't even sell it or anything. We're done. Here's a date. We're not going to do it anymore. Crazy stuff. Bringing in technologies to eliminate the need of print is really where we need to be, but we got to be careful when we do that. I recently see where they bought a company called Cinero. And Cinero is this AV company, the remote worker, managing communications, all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, do you really think you're going to beat out the players that are coming in that space? What's the plan for that? What's the plan for that product? How are you going to take that into the marketplace? See, the problem that Ricoh's created for itself is that if they come into the market with something that's really revolutionary, that's really going to change the world, change the game, and it has nothing to do with print, well, they're going to fool themselves that they can't talk about that. They can't come into the market and say, with the use of this product, we're going to eliminate millions and millions of pages from our customers. I can't wait for an OEM to come and actually say that. Based on this product in this company that we just bought, it'll allow our customers to eliminate millions of pages printed, making their workflows much more efficient, because we all know the biggest interruption to any workflow is to have to stop and print and scan it. You got to stop and copy, you got to stop and print, you got to stop and scan. Those are interruptions to workflow that people want to eliminate. They bought a company called MindShift, and that was a while back. And MindShift, the IT services company, that's the one they took this huge impairment charge against. And basically, they just rolled that right into Ricoh. So it doesn't exist out there on its own. It's just part of Ricoh. And it's curious what they're doing with that. Are they handling that the way a lot of dealers get into IT? Let's use our copy reps to go out and get us IT leads, and let's just flounder around with this IT deliverable. Questionable. The one thing I do like they bought was that those Ricoh smart lockers. That's a great deal. That's the future. That's the future. That's a great product. I think that Ricoh has some real capabilities to do something with Toshiba Tech in that retail business at Toshiba Tech. I've talked about that before. Maybe I'll do another more in-depth episode on that when we get to the financials, because these folks will all be sharing their financials pretty soon. But I want everybody to think about that. What are these OEMs bringing in? Are they bringing in technologies that allow them to live outside of print? Or are they bringing in technologies in hopes that these technologies will get more print business? Because you can't just hope for something that the end users don't want. You can't hope your way out of reality. It'll never work. So ladies and gentlemen, those of you that believe that you're going to buy these AV products and these communication products and you're going to change the world for the hybrid remote worker, y'all need to pay attention real close to a company called AT&T, because they're there. And they're AT&T. And what does AT&T do? Well, they manage communications for people. That's what they do. Do you honestly believe that they're not going to own that space? Of course they are. Of course they are. Just like they have alliances with people like Apple and Google and all the phone makers out there, right? Folks, you can't beat AT&T. Salesforce. Their aspirations around Salesforce and what they want to do with their customers is going to be really, really, really hard for some copier company that still brags about selling print into the marketplace, but they're going to be doing all these other wonderful things to compete with these people. You're not. So here's my last question I want to ask of Ricoh. When does Ricoh say, thanks, print dealers, but we are moving to another channel? And I want you all to really let this sink in. And I want to ask Ricoh a question. Are you going to go to the IT Nations meeting and set up a booth and talk to the thousands of IT services companies that might be interested in actually doing some things with you around your AV acquisition? You know, maybe they could even do some things with you around DocuWare. Are you going to explore what the world's going to? I think that's fair for all the OEMs. Because sooner or later, the document imaging channel won't exist. And we all know this. It's going away. People aren't going to stop printing. They're just going to print at such reduced volumes that it won't be sustainable for its own industry, obviously. Just like there's not an industry that just sells monitors, okay? So, folks, you need to think about this hard. Because maybe Ricoh's strategy was, let's just calm down these dinosaur dealers so that they'll maintain buying our A3 equipment and going out in the marketplace and overspeccing and overselling it just a little bit longer. And then eventually we won't need those folks anyway. We'll just shift over to the IT services community and we'll build out our services platform. Because the print channel just couldn't understand it. The analysts got all freaked out and started getting the marketplace all excited that Ricoh was going to get out of print and they were all going to go out of business and their dealerships were going to collapse. It's just absurd. Totally absurd. Totally absurd. Or, when does Ricoh finally admit that they are completely bearish on print? When can they go back to that talk track that Bloomberg wrote about and stick to it and be honest with their dealers? Be honest with their investors. What are we so afraid of? Well, personally, I believe we're afraid of status quo, and leadership's weak, and they don't know how to challenge it. And they fear if they challenge it, well, it'll disrupt their comfortable life. Or maybe, like a lot of folks, I think, they're just waiting until they retire and hoping it all works out. Ladies and gentlemen, tune in tomorrow. I'm going to talk about EKM. They're doing some exciting things. Exciting things. Wait till you find out what they're doing. they're getting ready to say, thanks, Steelers, but we don't need you anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all tomorrow because everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo.